The train wheezed to a stop at the dusty station, black smoke billowing into the harsh Arizona sky. Margaret Daisy Sullivan clutched her worn carpetbag with trembling hands, her best calico dress already damp with perspiration in the desert heat. She had traveled for 6 days from Missouri, carrying nothing but her few possessions and a letter promising a new life as a mail-order bride. The year was 1889, and the frontier town of Copper Creek sprawled before her like a sun-bleached skeleton. Wooden buildings lined the main street, their paint peeling under the relentless sun. Dust devils danced between the saloon and the general store, carrying the scent of horse manure and sagebrush. "Miss Sullivan," a gruff voice called out. Daisy turned to see a weathered man in his 50s, his face carved by wind and sun into deep grooves. This was Henry Morrison, her intended's father, though his cold eyes showed no welcome. "Yes, sir, I'm Margaret Sullivan, though folks call me Daisy." She attempted a smile, smoothing her travel-wrinkled skirt. Henry's gaze swept over her from head to toe, his mouth tightening. "Follow me," he said curtly, turning toward a wagon without offering to help with her bag. The ride to the Morrison Ranch took 2 hours through landscape that seemed torn from the pages of hell itself. Red rocks jutted from the earth like broken teeth, and scraggly mesquite trees offered no shade from the burning sun. Daisy had never seen such desolation. Back in Missouri, even in the worst droughts, there had been green somewhere. Here, the earth looked angry, wounded. "Your son, James, he wrote such lovely letters," Daisy ventured, trying to break the oppressive silence. Henry snorted. "James writes what he thinks will get him what he wants." The ranch appeared like a mirage, a cluster of adobe buildings surrounded by wooden corrals. It was larger than Daisy had imagined. Speaking of prosperity despite the harsh land, her heart lifted slightly. Perhaps she could make a good life here after all. But as the wagon pulled up to the main house, 3 figures emerged onto the porch, and Daisy's hope began to crumble. A severe woman in black bombazine stood with her arms crossed. Mrs. Morrison, clearly. Beside her, a younger woman with elaborate curls and a spotless blue dress smirked openly, and leaning against a post, separate from the others, stood a young man whose stillness drew Daisy's eye. Where the others radiated hostility, he simply watched, his face unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. "So, this is her, Mrs." Morrison's voice cut through the air like a rusty blade. "The bride James ordered from a catalog, like a plow or a packet of seeds." "Ma'am, Daisy began, but the woman raised a hand. "Don't ma'am me, girl. Let me look at you." She descended the steps, circling Daisy like a buyer examining livestock. "Good Lord, you're even plainer than I expected." "That dress, did you make it yourself? The stitching is crooked." Heat flooded Daisy's cheeks. She had made the dress, working by candlelight after long days cleaning houses to save money for the trip. "And your hands." The younger woman, James's sister, Catherine, Daisy guessed, grabbed Daisy's wrist roughly. "Look at these calluses. You're supposed to be a bride, not a field hand." "I've worked honest work," Daisy said quietly, pulling her hand back. "Listen to her accent." Catherine laughed, a tinkling, cruel sound. "Where did you say you were from? Some pig farm in Missouri?" "That's enough, Catherine," a low voice said. Everyone turned to look at the young man by the post. Now that he'd stepped forward, Daisy could see his face clearly. Luke Morrison. She realized? James's younger brother. He had the same strong jaw as his father, but his eyes held something different. Not warmth exactly, but not cruelty either. "Don't defend her, Luke." "Mrs." Morrison snapped. "This concerns James's future, and thereby the future of this ranch. We have a reputation to maintain." "Where is James?" Daisy asked, her voice smaller than she intended. "I'd like to meet my intended." The family exchanged glances that made Daisy's stomach twist. "James is in Tucson on business," Henry finally said. "He'll return in 3 days." 3 days? Daisy's heart sank. She had nowhere to go, no money for a hotel. "You'll stay in the summer kitchen, Mrs." Morrison declared. "It's good enough for a girl of your—" Background: dinner is at 6. Try not to embarrass yourself. The summer kitchen was a small adobe building behind the main house, used for cooking during the hottest months to keep heat away from the living quarters. It held a narrow cot, a washstand, and little else. Daisy set down her carpetbag and sat heavily on the bed, fighting tears. Through the small window, she watched the family return to the house. Only Luke lingered, looking back once before disappearing inside. At dinner, the humiliation continued. Daisy had changed into her second-best dress, pressed as well as she could manage. But Catherine still wrinkled her nose when Daisy entered the dining room. "Merciful heavens, is that the same dress in a different color?" Catherine stage whispered to her mother. The table was set with china and crystal Daisy had only seen in shop windows. She watched the others carefully, trying to copy their movements, but when she used the wrong fork for the salad course, Catherine's laughter pealed out. "Oh, this is precious. Luke, you must teach her which fork is which. Perhaps draw her a picture." Luke, seated across from Daisy, kept his eyes on his plate. He had spoken no word to her directly, though she felt his gaze when others looked away. "Tell us about your family, Miss Sullivan." "Mrs." Morrison said, though her tone suggested she expected nothing good. "My parents passed when I was young," Daisy said carefully. "I was raised by my aunt until she died 2 years ago. I've been supporting myself since then." "Supporting yourself how?" Catherine leaned forward with false interest. "Cleaning houses, taking in washing, honest work, as I said." "A washerwoman." Catherine clapped her hands in mock delight. "James has outdone himself. First, he insists on finding a bride through those horrid advertisements, and then he chooses a washerwoman. That's enough." Luke's fork clattered against his plate. The sharpness in his voice surprised everyone, including himself. It seemed... He cleared his throat. "Pass the salt." The rest of the meal passed in tense silence. Daisy forced down each bite, though the food tasted like sawdust in her mouth. When it finally ended, she escaped to the summer kitchen, where she finally let the tears fall. She had been so foolish. The letters from James had painted a picture of a lonely rancher seeking a compassionate companion. He had seemed kind, thoughtful, but if the family was any indication... A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She wiped her face quickly and opened the door to find Luke standing in the darkness, a plate in his hands. "You didn't eat much," he said simply, offering the plate. It held a generous portion of beef and beans, still warm. Thank you." She took the plate, surprised by the gesture. "Your family doesn't seem pleased with my presence." Luke's jaw tightened. "My family has particular ideas about propriety." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "You should leave, tonight, before James returns." "Leave?" Daisy's voice cracked. "I have nowhere to go, no money. I spent everything getting here." "Then God help you," he said quietly. He turned to go, then stopped. "There's a well behind the barn if you need water, and bar the door at night. There are coyotes." He disappeared into the darkness, leaving Daisy holding the plate and wondering if his warning about coyotes referred only to the four-legged kind. That night, as she lay on the narrow cot listening to the foreign sounds of the desert, Daisy made a decision. She had survived her parents' death, her aunt's passing, and 2 years of grinding poverty. She would not let these people break her. When James returned, surely things would be different. They had to be. But at 3 a.m, when she woke to use the outhouse, she heard voices from the main house. The window was open to catch what little coolness the night offered, and the words carried clearly. "Send her back immediately," Mrs. Morrison was saying. "She's completely unsuitable. James won't like it." Henry's voice rumbled. "James isn't here, and when he sees what he's actually gotten, he'll thank us. The girl is a joke. Henry, can you imagine presenting her to the other ranchers' wives? We'd be laughingstocks." There was a long pause. Then Henry spoke again. "I'll give her money for a ticket in the morning. Tell her James reconsidered." "Good. The sooner she's gone, the better." Daisy stood frozen in the darkness, her bare feet cold on the packed earth. They would send her away like unwanted goods. The humiliation burned worse than any desert sun. She crept back to the summer kitchen and quietly packed her few belongings. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford, but neither could she bear to face their false pity in the morning. She would leave now, under cover of darkness, with what little dignity remained to her. The ranch was silent as she slipped out, her carpetbag clutched in one hand. The moon was new, offering little light, but she could make out the road they had traveled. It would be a long walk to town, but she had walked farther in her life. She had gone perhaps a mile when the night exploded into chaos. A figure lunged from behind a cluster of rocks, reeking of whiskey and unwashed flesh. Daisy screamed as rough hands grabbed her, spinning her around. Well, what have we here?" The man's face was a blur of stubble and broken teeth. "Little lady out all alone? That ain't safe." Daisy struggled, but the man was stronger. His hands pawed at her, and she could smell his rancid breath as he pressed closer. She opened her mouth to scream again when suddenly the man's weight was yanked away from her. In the darkness, she could make out two figures grappling in the dust. Grunts and the sound of fists meeting flesh filled the air. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. One figure lay still on the ground while the other stood, breathing heavily. "Are you hurt?" The voice was low, urgent, but the speaker stayed in the shadows. No, I don't think so." Daisy's voice shook. "Get to town. Don't stop. There's a boarding house run by Mrs. Fletcher on 2nd Street. Tell her." "Tell her you're a friend of the Morrison family. She'll give you a room." Before Daisy could ask who her rescuer was, he had melted back into the darkness, leaving her alone with the unconscious attacker. She didn't need to be told twice. She ran, stumbling over rocks and ruts, until the lights of Copper Creek appeared before her. Mrs. Fletcher, a plump woman with kind eyes, asked no questions when Daisy appeared at her door at dawn. Dusty and shaken, she simply showed her to a small, clean room and brought her hot water for washing. "You'll be wanting work, I expect." "Mrs. Fletcher said pragmatically, "I could use help in the kitchen, if you're not too proud for it." "I'm not too proud for any honest work," Daisy said firmly. And so began her new life. Each morning, she rose before dawn to help prepare breakfast for the boarding house guests. She scrubbed pots, kneaded bread, and served meals with quiet efficiency. At night, she fell into bed exhausted but grateful for the roof over her head. She tried not to think about the Morrison Ranch, about the family that had rejected her so cruelly. She tried not to wonder who had saved her that night on the road, and she absolutely did not allow herself to remember a pair of watchful eyes under the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat, or wonder why Luke Morrison had warned her to leave. But late at night, when the desert wind howled outside her window, she sometimes pressed a hand to her belly and whispered a promise to the tiny life growing there, a secret she had carried from Missouri, the real reason she had answered that advertisement for a mail-order bride. Her child would have a chance at life, even if it meant Daisy had to endure every humiliation the world could offer. She was no joke. She was a survivor, and someday, somehow, she would prove it to them all. 8 months had passed since that humiliating night when Margaret Daisy Sullivan fled the Morrison Ranch. The desert winter had given way to spring, and now summer's furnace heat bore down on Copper Creek once more. But this time, Daisy walked the dusty main street with her head held high, one hand resting protectively on her prominently rounded belly. The town that had once seemed foreign now felt familiar. She nodded to Mrs. Chen at the laundry, waved to old Miguel who ran the feed store. They nodded back, though she caught the whispers that followed in her wake. An unmarried woman in her condition was scandal enough, but Daisy had learned to armor herself against judgment. "Mrs. Fletcher needs flour," she told Mr. Garrett at the general store, placing her carefully counted coins on the counter. He took her money without meeting her eyes, as had become his custom these past months. She was used to it now, the averted gazes, the hushed conversations that stopped when she entered a room. Let them talk. She had more pressing concerns than the town's gossip. The bell above the door chimed as another customer entered. Daisy was examining bolts of fabric, calculating whether she could afford enough calico to make baby clothes, when she heard the sharp intake of breath behind her. She turned slowly, knowing before she saw him who it would be. Luke Morrison stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands, dust from the trail still clinging to his clothes. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. His eyes traveled from her face to her swollen belly, and something flickered across his features. Surprise, certainly, but something else too, something that looked almost like pain. "Miss Sullivan," he said quietly. "Mr. Morrison." She was proud of how steady her voice sounded. "Mr." Garrett busied himself suddenly with a display of canned goods, pretending not to watch this unexpected drama unfolding in his store. "You're still in town," Luke said unnecessarily. "Where else would I be?" She turned back to the fabric, though her hands trembled slightly as she touched the soft cotton. Luke moved closer, lowering his voice. "Are you well? Do you need—" "I need nothing from the Morrison family," she said firmly. "I've managed quite well on my own. I can see that." His tone was dry, and she couldn't tell if he was mocking her or not. "The child is none of your concern." She gathered her flower and moved toward the door, but he stepped into her path. "Daisy, please, He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "That night, when you left, I looked for you the next day, but you'd vanished. Your mother made it quite clear I wasn't welcome. I simply saved everyone the awkwardness of a formal dismissal. That wasn't right." "What they did to you wasn't right," she laughed, a bitter sound. "And what did you do about it, Mr. Morrison? Besides bring me a plate of scraps like I was a stray dog?" Color rose in his face. "I told you to leave. Yes, you did. The only honest thing anyone in your family did for me." She pushed past him, but his next words stopped her at the door. Was it James?" She understood what he was asking. The whole town wondered. She knew. Who had fathered the mail-order bride's bastard child? Some believed she'd arrived already carrying her shame. Others whispered darker theories. "Goodbye, Mr. Morrison," she said without turning around. The encounter left her shaken. She'd done so well these past months, building a small life for herself and her coming child. Mrs. Fletcher had been more than fair, providing room and board in exchange for Daisy's help in the kitchen. She'd even begun teaching Daisy to read better, patient with her limited education. But seeing Luke had stirred up memories she'd tried to bury, not just of that horrible night, but of the attack on the road, of strong hands pulling her attacker away. She'd never learned who had saved her, though she had her suspicions. Word traveled fast in a town like Copper Creek. Within days, everyone knew that Luke Morrison had been seen talking to the fallen mail-order bride in Garrett's store. The whispers intensified. "Heard she tried to trap one brother, now she's after the other," Catherine Morrison said loudly in the millinery shop, knowing full well Daisy was within earshot as she delivered Mrs. Fletcher's mending. But the drought that began that summer soon gave the town more pressing concerns than Daisy's reputation. The rains that should have come in July never materialized. By August, the creek that gave the town its name had dwindled to a trickle. Wells ran low, cattle began to die. The Morrison Ranch, like all the others, needed every hand available. Desperation drove them to hire anyone willing to work, even women with reputations. When Daisy saw the notice posted at the general store, "Ranch hands needed, Morrison Ranch, fair wages," she stood staring at it for a long moment. "You're not thinking of applying?" Mrs. Fletcher asked when Daisy mentioned it that evening. "The pay is 3 times what I make here." Daisy said simply, "I need to think of the baby." Mrs. Fletcher's face creased with worry. "Those people were cruel to you. Child, why would you go back?" "Because I'm not the same frightened girl who ran away in the night," Daisy said, "and because my child deserves every chance I can give." The next morning, she put on her best dress, newly made from fabric Mrs. Fletcher had given her, and walked the 2 hours to the Morrison Ranch. The landscape looked even more desolate than before. if that were possible. The drought had stripped away what little green remained, leaving only red earth and skeletal brush. She found Luke in the barn, doctoring a horse's split hoof. He looked up when her shadow fell across the doorway, and his hands stilled on the horse's leg. "I've come about the work," she said without preamble. "Daisy." He straightened slowly. "You can't be serious. Your notice said you needed hands. I have two, and they're not afraid of hard work." "You're with child," he said, as if she might have forgotten. "I'm pregnant, not invalid. I've been working every day these past 8 months. I can tend horses, mend tack, whatever needs doing that doesn't require heavy lifting." He studied her for a long moment. She could see him taking in the changes, the work-roughened hands, the sun-darkened skin, the steel in her spine that hadn't been there before. "My mother will never allow it. Your mother isn't running the horse operation. You are." She'd done her research, learned how the ranch divided its operations. "Unless you're still too afraid to cross her." Something flashed in his eyes at that. "I was never afraid." "No? Then prove it." It was a challenge, perhaps foolishly given. But Luke Morrison was not the only one who had changed in 8 months. The docile girl who'd accepted every insult was gone, forged into something harder by necessity and impending motherhood. "The work starts at dawn," he said finally. "You'll sleep in the bunkhouse with the other seasonal workers. The pay is what was posted, no special considerations. And if you can't keep up, you're gone." "Fair enough. One more thing." He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of leather and horse and honest sweat. "If anyone gives you trouble, anyone, you come to me. Understood? I can take care of myself." "That wasn't what I asked." She met his steady gaze. "Understood." The bunkhouse was a long, low building that housed the seasonal workers. Most were men, but the drought had driven several women to seek ranch work as well. They eyed Daisy's belly with curiosity but said nothing. Desperation made strange bedfellows, and they all needed the wages too badly to make trouble. The work was hard but satisfying. Daisy mucked stalls, fed horses, mended bridles and saddles with neat, careful stitches. Her hands, already calloused from months of kitchen work, adapted quickly. The horses didn't care about her reputation or her swelling belly. They only cared that she was gentle and brought their grain on time. Luke kept his distance at first, treating her like any other worker, but she caught him watching sometimes, a furrow between his brows as if she were a puzzle he couldn't solve. The main house might have been on another continent for all the contact Daisy had with it. Occasionally she glimpsed Mrs. Morrison on the porch, her black-clad figure radiating disapproval. Catherine's tinkling laugh sometimes carried on the wind, but they came no closer, as if Daisy's presence in their domain again was a contamination to be avoided. James had never returned from Tucson. She learned from bunkhouse gossip. Business had kept him away. Then the drought had trapped him there, unwilling to make the harsh journey back. Part of her was relieved. She had no wish to face the man whose letters had lured her into this mess. One blistering afternoon, as she worked to repair a section of fence, the heat overcame her. The world tilted, her vision graying at the edges. She reached for the fence post to steady herself and missed, crumpling to the hard-packed earth. When she woke, she was in the shade of the barn, something cool and wet on her forehead. Luke knelt beside her, his face tight with concern. "Damn it, Daisy," he muttered. "What are you trying to prove?" "I'm fine," she said, trying to sit up. His hand on her shoulder kept her down. "You fainted in 100-degree heat while 8 months gone with child. You're not fine." His hand moved from her shoulder to her belly, an unconscious gesture of concern. The baby chose that moment to kick, and Luke jerked back as if burned, staring at where his hand had been. "It's strong," he said quietly. "Like its mother," Daisy said, finally managing to sit up. "Who is the father? Daisy?" The question came out rough, as if pulled from him against his will. She looked at him for a long moment. This man who'd warned her to run, who'd perhaps saved her that night on the road, who'd given her work when she desperately needed it despite what it might cost him with his family. "There was a man," she said finally. "Back in Missouri, he promised marriage, then disappeared when I told him about the baby. That's why I answered your brother's advertisement. I thought I could start fresh, make a decent life." She laughed bitterly. "So much for that plan." Luke was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't speak again. Then, "You could have told the truth from the start." "Could I? Would your family have been any kinder to a pregnant bride than to a poor one?" He had no answer for that. "I should get back to work," she said, struggling to her feet. "No." His tone brooked no argument. "You're done for the day. Doctor's orders. You're not a doctor. Out here, I'm close enough." He helped her stand, his touch careful. "Can you make it to the bunkhouse?" "I've been making it on my own for quite some time now." "That's not what I asked." She heard an echo of their earlier conversation and almost smiled. "Yes, I can make it." As she walked slowly back to the bunkhouse, she felt his eyes following her. Something had shifted between them in those moments in the barn, though she couldn't name exactly what. The baby moved within her, restless in the heat, and she rubbed the spot gently. "Soon, little one," she whispered. "Soon we'll see what kind of life we can build in this unforgiving place." That night, she found a basket outside her bunk, fresh bread, cheese, dried fruit, and a note in careful handwriting. "Eat. That's an order." L. She ate every bite, too practical to let pride interfere with nourishment for her child. And if she kept the note tucked beneath her pillow, reading it by lamplight until the words were burned into her memory, that was nobody's business but her own. The first weeks passed in careful avoidance. Luke assigned Daisy tasks that kept her away from the main working areas, and she understood the unspoken message. He was protecting her from potential confrontations while maintaining the fiction that she was just another hired hand. They exchanged only necessary words about work, nothing more. But a ranch has its own rhythm, and soon that rhythm drew them together despite their intentions. Late evenings found them both in the barn, tending to sick animals that required round-the-clock care. Dawn brought them to the same corrals, preparing for the day's labor. Neither acknowledged these moments of intersection, yet neither changed their patterns to avoid them. One evening, as purple dusk settled over the desert, Daisy struggled to lift a saddle onto its rack. Her expanded belly made the task awkward, and she'd been too proud to ask for help. Luke appeared beside her without a word, taking the saddle from her hands. "You're stubborn as a mule," he said, hefting it easily onto the rack. "I've been called worse." She rubbed her lower back, trying to ease the constant ache. "By my family, no doubt." His voice carried a bitter edge. "Your family was honest about their feelings. I can respect that, even if I don't like it." Luke turned to face her fully. In the dim light, she could see the weathered lines around his eyes, the sun-bleached streaks in his dark hair. He wasn't handsome in the classic sense. His features were too sharp, too angular. But there was something compelling about his face, especially when he looked at her with that intensity. "They were cruel," he said flatly. "There's nothing respectable about cruelty." "And what about silence? Is that more respectable?" He flinched. "I deserve that." "Do you—" She moved past him toward the barn door, but paused. "That night, on the road, it was you, wasn't it? You followed me." A long silence stretched between them. "Finally," he said. "I couldn't let you walk to town alone in the dark, but you could let me face your family's contempt alone? I'm not proud of that." She nodded slowly. "At least you're honest about it." Something shifted after that conversation. The careful distance between them began to erode, worn away by small kindnesses and shared silences. Luke began leaving things where she would find them: a cushion for the hard bench where she mended tack, a jar of liniment for sore muscles, fresh water in the shade where she worked. Daisy found herself reciprocating. When Luke worked late, she would leave coffee warming on the stove. When his favorite horse developed colic, she sat up with him through the night, brewing willow bark tea and speaking softly to keep the animal calm. You have a way with them, Luke observed as the horse finally began to improve near dawn. Animals are simpler than people, she said, stroking the horse's neck. They don't care about your past or your mistakes. They only care about how you treat them in the moment. If only people could learn that lesson. She looked at him across the horse's back. His shirt was rumpled, his hair mussed from running his hands through it. He looked younger this way, vulnerable in his exhaustion and relief. Some people do, she said softly. Their eyes held for a moment before she looked away, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the dawn-lit barn, of being alone together in the quiet hours before the ranch woke. Daisy, he began, but she cut him off. I should check on the other horses. She fled before he could say whatever had put that look in his eyes, that softness she wasn't ready to acknowledge. The next test came from an unexpected source. Tom Brennan, a seasonal hand with wandering eyes and busy hands, had been watching Daisy since her arrival. She'd managed to avoid him, but one afternoon found her alone in the tack room when he cornered her. Well, he drawled, blocking the doorway. The fallen angel, all alone. Move aside, Mr. Brennan. Now, that's not friendly. Here I am, thinking you might be lonely. A woman in your condition. No man to take care of her. Seems like you'd be grateful for some attention. He moved closer, and Daisy backed up until she hit the wall. Fear spiked through her. Memories of another man, another attack. I said move aside. Or what? He reached out to touch her face. You'll tell Morrison? Everyone knows why he keeps you around, but he's not here now. Is he? No, a cold voice said from behind Brennan. But I am. Luke stood in the doorway, and Daisy had never seen such fury in a man's eyes. Brennan turned, his face paling. Just having a friendly chat. Brennan said, Pack your things, Luke said quietly. You're done here. Now wait a minute. Luke stepped forward, and though Brennan had several inches and pounds on him, he backed away. Pack your things. If I see you near her again, you'll leave this ranch in considerably worse condition than you arrived. Brennan fled. Luke remained in the doorway, his hands clenched at his sides, visibly fighting for control. Are you hurt? He asked without looking at her. No. Her voice shook slightly. Thank you. I told you to come to me if anyone bothered you. It just happened. I didn't have time. He turned then, and the raw emotion in his face stopped her words. Do you think this is easy for me, watching you work yourself to exhaustion, seeing other men look at you like that, knowing what my family did to you, what I let them do? Luke, I dream about that night. The words seemed torn from him. The night you left, I dream about what would have happened if I'd been too late, if I hadn't followed you. But you did follow. You saved me. I should have stood up to them from the beginning. Should have told my mother to hold her vicious tongue. Should have... He broke off, running a hand through his hair. You must hate me. I don't hate you. The admission surprised them both. I did for a while, but hate takes energy I don't have to spare. He crossed the small space between them, stopping just out of reach. What do you have energy for? The question hung between them, loaded with possibilities. Daisy felt her heart racing, aware of every inch between their bodies. Survival, she said finally, and hope. For my child. Just for the child? That has to be enough. Does it? She couldn't answer. He was too close, the concern in his eyes too genuine. She'd armored herself against cruelty, but kindness, that could undo her. I should go, she whispered. Yes, he agreed, but neither moved. The spell was broken by voices outside, other workers arriving for afternoon chores. Luke stepped back, the mask of the boss sliding back into place, but as Daisy passed him in the doorway, he caught her hand briefly. No one will bother you again, he said. I promise. Word of Brennan's dismissal spread quickly. The other workers treated Daisy with new respect, though whether from fear of Luke or genuine regard, she couldn't say. She caught speculative looks, heard whispers that stopped when she approached. The story was too delicious to resist. The scorned mail-order bride and the brooding rancher's son. "You're playing with fire, girl," Mrs. Fletcher warned when Daisy visited on her day off. "The Morrisons aren't people to cross. I'm not playing at anything." Daisy said, "I'm working to provide for my child." Nothing more. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. Something was building between her and Luke. Something that went beyond gratitude or proximity. She saw it in the way his face softened when he watched her with the horses. Felt it in the careful way he helped her when her pregnancy made tasks difficult. Most of all, she felt it in the quiet moments, when they found themselves alone in the barn at day's end, when their hands brushed passing tools between them, when she caught him looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch. "The baby will come soon," she said one evening as they worked side by side, repairing a broken gate. "I know." His hands stilled on the wood. "What will you do after?" "I hadn't thought that far ahead. One day at a time has been my way." "You could stay," he said quietly. "There's always work here. Your family. My family doesn't run my life." The fierceness in his voice surprised her. "Not anymore." She studied his profile in the fading light. "What changed?" "You did." He turned to face her fully. "You came back. After everything they did, you came back stronger. It made me realize what a coward I'd been." "You're not a coward." "No, I let them humiliate you. Let them drive you away because I was afraid of causing conflict." "You were afraid of your mother," she said gently. "There's no shame in that. She's formidable. You stood up to her. I had nothing to lose. You had everything." "Did I?" He stepped closer. "What good is everything if you can't live with yourself?" The setting sun painted the desert in shades of gold and crimson. In the distance, a coyote called, and its pack answered. Daisy shivered despite the warmth. "You're cold," Luke said. "No, But he was already shrugging out of his jacket, draping it around her shoulders. The gesture was so tender, so unexpected, that tears pricked her eyes. "Daisy," he said softly. "Don't." She pulled the jacket closer, inhaling the scent of him. "Please don't." "Don't what?" "Don't be kind to me. I can handle anything but kindness." "Then I'll be cruel," he said, but his hand came up to cup her cheek with infinite gentleness. "I'll be terrible. I'll tell you that you're the strongest woman I've ever known. That watching you these past weeks has been torture and revelation in equal measure. That I lie awake at night thinking about Luke." His name was barely a whisper. "Tell me to stop," he said. "Tell me to walk away, and I will." She couldn't. Instead, she leaned into his touch, closing her eyes as his thumb traced her cheekbone. "This is impossible," she said. "I know. Your family will disown you. Let them. The whole town will talk. They already do. I'm carrying another man's child. I don't care." She opened her eyes at that, searching his face. "How can you not care?" "Because I see you," he said simply. "Not what happened to you, not what others think of you, just you, and you're worth any price." The baby chose that moment to kick hard, making her gasp. Luke's hand dropped from her face to her belly, hesitant until she covered it with her own, pressing it against where the baby moved. "Strong," he said again, wonder in his voice. "Like its mother," she replied, echoing their earlier conversation. "And loved," he added quietly. "Like its mother should be." The words hung between them, a promise and a question all at once. Daisy felt herself standing at a precipice, one choice leading back to safety and solitude, the other toward something unknown, but no longer quite as frightening. "I should go," she said, but made no move to leave. "Yes," he agreed, his hand still warm against her belly, her hand still covering his, the desert evening wrapped around them. And for a moment, in the space between sunset and darkness, anything seemed possible. The storm came without warning, as desert storms often do. One moment the evening sky was clear, the next, black clouds rolled in from the mountains like an advancing army. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in minutes, and the first fat raindrops quickly became a deluge. Daisy was in the far pasture when it hit, trying to herd the last of the horses to shelter. The animals, already skittish from the sudden pressure change, scattered in panic as lightning split the sky. She struggled against the wind, her water-soaked dress clinging to her swollen form, making movement difficult. "Daisy!" Luke's voice barely carried over the thunder. He appeared through the rain like a ghost, grabbing her arm. "The barn's too far. The line shack." The line shack was a small shelter used by cowboys working the far ranges. It was closer than the barn, but still a quarter-mile through increasingly treacherous terrain. They stumbled through mud that sucked at their boots. Luke's arm around her waist, practically carrying her when she faltered. They burst through the door just as hail began to fall. Ice balls the size of marbles hammering the tin roof with deafening force. The shack was barely 8 feet square, containing only a narrow cot, a pot-bellied stove, and a shelf with emergency supplies. "You're freezing," Luke said, already moving to the stove. His hands shook as he fumbled with matches. Daisy couldn't stop shivering. Her dress was soaked through, and the baby had gone ominously still. "The horses will find their own shelter. They're smarter than we are." He got the fire started, then turned to her. "You need to get out of those wet clothes." She looked around the tiny space. There was nowhere to go for privacy. "There's a blanket on the cot." He turned his back. "I won't look." With numb fingers, she peeled off the sodden dress and undergarments, wrapping herself in the rough wool blanket. It smelled of horses and smoke, but it was dry and warming slowly from the heat of the stove. "All right," she said softly. He turned, and something flickered in his eyes at the sight of her. She must have looked a sight hair plastered to her head, wrapped in a horse blanket, belly round beneath the wool. But the way he looked at her didn't make her feel ridiculous. "Better?" he asked. "Yes." She moved closer to the stove, holding her hands out to the warmth. "Thank you." He draped her wet things over the single chair to dry, then shrugged out of his own soaked jacket and shirt. Daisy tried not to stare at the lean muscles of his back, the way firelight played across his skin. The storm raged outside, turning the little shack into an island. Thunder shook the walls, and rain hammered the roof so hard they had to raise their voices to be heard. "We'll be here a while," Luke said, settling on the floor near the stove. Daisy lowered herself carefully onto the cot. "Your family will wonder where you are." "Let them wonder." His voice carried an edge of defiance. They sat in silence for a time, listening to the storm. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Daisy felt the baby stir, a gentle roll that made her breathe easier. "May I ask you something?" Luke said suddenly. "Why did you really come west, even with your situation? There must have been other options." Daisy considered her words carefully. "When you're a woman alone, with no family and little money, options become very limited. I could have gone to a home for wayward women, given the baby up, lived in shame, or I could try for something better." She looked at him directly. "Your brother's letters painted a picture of possibility, a new start where the past didn't matter." "James always was good with words," Luke said bitterly. "He never meant to be cruel. How could he know what kind of family he was bringing me into?" He knew. Luke's jaw tightened. He knew exactly what Mother was like. He just didn't care. All he wanted was someone to keep his house and warm his bed. Someone who wouldn't have the standing to make demands. "And you? What did you want?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "I wanted to meet you first," he said finally. "When James showed us your letter, your photograph, there was something in your eyes, a strength. I wanted to know if it was real. And it was more than I imagined." He stood abruptly, pacing the small space. "Do you know what these months have been like? Watching you work, seeing you hold your head high despite everything. You've made me see my own cowardice so clearly it burns. You're not—" "I am." He stopped pacing, facing her. "I've spent my whole life avoiding conflict. keeping peace, letting my mother rule because it was easier than fighting. Then you arrived, and in one day you showed more courage than I'd managed in 26 years. Courage? Daisy laughed shakily. I ran away in the middle of the night. You survived. You built a new life. You came back when you needed work. Faced us all down. That's courage. The wind howled, and something crashed outside. A tree branch. Perhaps. They both jumped. Luke moved instinctively closer to the cot, as if to shield her. I'm all right, she said, but her voice trembled. Are you? He sat on the edge of the cot, careful to leave space between them. Daisy, tell me the truth. Are you really all right? The gentleness in his voice undid her. No, she whispered, and suddenly tears were falling. I'm terrified. Every day I'm terrified. Of having this baby alone. Of not being able to provide. Of what people say. Of... She trailed off, wiping her face angrily. I'm sorry. I don't usually... Don't apologize. His hand found hers, calloused fingers intertwining with her work-worn ones. You're allowed to be frightened. God knows you have reason. I used to be different, she said. Back in Missouri. Before. I used to laugh. I loved to dance. I thought the world was full of good people and happy endings. What happened? His thumb traced circles on her palm. The father? Robert was the banker's son. Handsome, charming, full of promises. He said we'd marry as soon as he convinced his father. I believed him. She laughed bitterly. I was such a fool. The night I told him about the baby, he gave me $20 and told me to take care of it. When I refused, he said I was nothing but a cleaning girl trying to trap him. His father had me dismissed from my position the next day. Luke's hand tightened on hers. He forced you? No, she said quietly. I was willing. I thought we were in love. That's what makes me the biggest fool of all. You're not a fool for believing someone's promises. He's the one without honor. Honor, she repeated. Such an old-fashioned word. Some things shouldn't go out of fashion. She looked at him then, really looked at him. The firelight caught the gold flecks in his brown eyes, highlighted the strong line of his jaw. He was nothing like Robert, no easy charm, no flowery words. But there was something solid about Luke Morrison, something true. Why do you care? She asked. About me, about the baby. We're nothing to you. You're wrong. He shifted closer, his free hand coming up to cup her face. You're everything I didn't know I was looking for. Luke, I know it's impossible. I know the timing is wrong, that you have every reason not to trust another man's words, but I need you to know. He took a breath. I'm falling in love with you. Daisy Sullivan. God help me. But I am. The storm chose that moment to intensify. Thunder crashing so loud the walls shook. Daisy jerked, and Luke's arms came around her instinctively, pulling her against his chest. She should have pulled away, should have maintained distance. Instead, she let herself be held, let herself feel safe for the first time in so many months. This is madness, she whispered against his shoulder. Yes, he agreed, his breath warm against her hair. Your mother will destroy you. Let her try. The whole town will... Damn the town. He pulled back enough to look at her face. Damn everyone who isn't us. Here, now. She saw her own longing reflected in his eyes. Despite every rational argument, despite the impossibility of it all, she wanted this, wanted him. Luke, she breathed. And then his lips were on hers. The kiss was nothing like Robert's practiced seductions. This was raw, honest, a claiming and a surrender all at once. His hands tangled in her damp hair, and she gripped his shoulders, anchoring herself in the storm of sensation. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, reality crashed back. Daisy touched her lips, still feeling the burn of his. We shouldn't have... Don't, he said fiercely. Don't you dare apologize for that. But... He kissed her again, softer this time, a gentle exploration that made her heart ache. I've wanted to do that since the day you came back, he murmured against her lips. Seeing you strong and proud, despite everything, You've haunted my dreams, Daisy. This can't happen, she said weakly, even as her hands traced the planes of his chest. I'm pregnant with another man's child. You have a life, a family, a future. None of it means anything without you. He rested his forehead against hers. I know it's too fast. I know you have no reason to believe me, but I swear to you, on whatever honor I have left, I will take care of you. Both of you. The baby chose that moment to kick, hard enough that Luke felt it against his own body. His eyes widened in wonder. See, he said softly. Even the little one agrees. Daisy laughed through tears she hadn't realized were falling. You're insane. Probably. He wiped her tears with his thumbs. Is that a yes? To what? You haven't asked me anything. Then I'll ask. He shifted, going to one knee on the rough wooden floor. Daisy Sullivan, will you let me court you properly, in front of God and everybody? Consequences be damned. Your mother will have to accept it or lose a son. His jaw set with determination. I'm done living by her rules. Daisy looked at him kneeling there, shirtless and earnest, the storm raging outside their tiny shelter. It was madness. It was impossible. It was everything she'd stopped believing in. Yes, she whispered. His smile transformed his face, and then he was kissing her again, pulling her down beside him on the narrow cot. They lay together, her back against his chest, his arms protective around her and the baby. The storm continued its fury, but inside the little shack, there was only warmth and possibility. Sleep, he murmured. I'll keep watch. Watch for what? Everything. Nothing. Just let me hold you. So she did, drifting off to the sound of rain and the steady beat of his heart against her back. For the first time in months, she felt hope bloom inside her chest. Fragile but real. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Tomorrow his family would rage and the town would gossip. But tonight, in their storm-wrapped sanctuary, they had found each other. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The morning after the storm dawned clear and merciless. Luke and Daisy returned to find the ranch in chaos, fences down. A barn roof partially collapsed, horses scattered. But the damage to property was nothing compared to the storm that erupted when they walked in together. Her wearing his jacket, both bearing the unmistakable look of a night spent close. Catherine saw them first. Her shriek brought Mrs. Morrison to the porch, and the older woman's face went white, then red with fury. You dare, she hissed at Daisy. You shameless creature! You dare corrupt my son? Mother, Luke said firmly, stepping forward. Daisy hasn't corrupted anyone. I've asked to court her, and she's accepted. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the ranch hands stopped their work to stare. Court her, Mrs. Morrison's voice rose to a pitch that made the horses nervous. Court this fallen woman. Have you lost your mind? No, Luke said calmly. For the first time in my life, I'm thinking clearly. Get off my land. Mrs. Morrison turned to Daisy. Now, before I have you thrown off. She stays, Luke said. She's my employee, and she stays. Your employee? His mother laughed bitterly. Is that what we're calling it now? The confrontation drew a crowd. Ranch hands, household staff, even some townspeople who'd come to help with storm damage, all watched the drama unfold. Daisy felt their eyes like brands on her skin, heard the whispers starting already. I should go, she said quietly to Luke. No. He took her hand publicly, deliberately. We've done nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. Catherine had found her voice. She's carrying another man's bastard. And you want to court her? What's next? Luke, will you marry her? Give that child your name. If she'll have me, yes. The words rang across the ranch yard. Daisy gasped, as shocked as everyone else. They'd spoken of courting, not marriage. Luke, she whispered urgently. You don't have to. I mean it, he said, turning to face her. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but yes, if you'll have me. You're insane. Catherine spat. She's bewitched you. Can't you see what she is? A gold digger who failed with one brother and moved on to the next? That was too much. Daisy pulled her hand from Luke's and stepped forward. "I've taken your insults in silence once before," she said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "But I won't stand here and let you poison what's between Luke and me with your ugly assumptions. How dare you speak to me? I dare because I have nothing left to lose." Daisy interrupted. "You've already branded me with every awful name you know. You've already tried to destroy me, but I'm still here. And if Luke is foolish enough to want me despite everything, then that's between him and me, not you, Mrs." Morrison's face contorted with rage. "Henry," she called. "Henry, come deal with your son." But when Henry Morrison emerged from the house, he looked older than his years, worn down by drought and disaster. He surveyed the scene, his wife rigid with fury, his daughter sneering, his younger son standing firm beside a pregnant woman in a borrowed jacket. "Enough," he said quietly. "There's work to be done. Storm won't clean itself up. Henry, are you listening to this madness? I said enough. Margaret," his voice carried a finality that surprised everyone, including his wife. "Luke's a grown man. He'll make his choices." He looked at his son. "You sure about this, boy?" "I am," Henry nodded slowly. "Then get to work, both of you. Horses won't round themselves up." The crowd dispersed reluctantly, denied the explosive confrontation they'd expected. But Daisy knew this was far from over. She could feel Mrs. Morrison's hatred like a physical force. The day passed in a blur of hard work, despite the personal drama. The ranch needed every hand to recover from the storm. Daisy worked alongside the others, ignoring stares and whispers. Luke stayed close when he could, a protective presence that both comforted and worried her. By evening, the gossip had spread to town. When Daisy went to the general store for supplies, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Women pulled their skirts aside as she passed. Men leered or looked away, depending on their nature. "Heard you've set your cap at another Morrison, boy." "Mrs." Garrett said coldly as she tallied Daisy's purchases. "Suppose one's as good as another to your kind." Daisy kept her dignity, paid for her goods, and left without responding. But the words stung. Outside, she nearly collided with someone entering the store. "Pardon me, She stopped. The man before her was well-dressed, handsome in a polished way that seemed foreign in this rough town. Something about him seemed familiar, though she couldn't place it. "No pardon needed," he said smoothly, but his eyes fixed on her swollen belly with an expression that made her skin crawl. "You must be the famous Miss Sullivan. I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage, sir. Forgive me, Richard Dalton. I'm in town on business." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Mining interests. I hear there's been quite a stir at the Morrison Ranch. Storm damage always causes a stir," she said carefully, trying to move past him. "Indeed." He stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy. "Good evening. Miss Sullivan, I'm sure we'll meet again." Something in his tone made her shiver. She hurried back to the ranch, unable to shake the feeling that she'd just encountered a new threat. That night, Luke found her in the barn, checking on a mare due to foal soon. "You shouldn't let them bother you," he said, having heard about the town's reception. Easier said than done. She stroked the mare's neck, finding comfort in the simple task. "I meant what I said about marriage." She turned to face him. "Luke, you can't throw away your life because you feel sorry for me." "Is that what you think this is? Pity?" He crossed to her in 2 strides, backing her against the stall door. "Does this feel like pity?" He kissed her with a passion that left no room for doubt. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I've never wanted anything the way I want you," he said roughly. "It scares the hell out of me. But it's true. Your family will never accept it. Then I'll build us our own family. You, me, the baby." His hand went to her belly. "I'll be a good father. Daisy, I swear it. You don't even know if it's a boy or girl. Doesn't matter. It's part of you, so I'll love it." The simplicity of his declaration broke through her last defenses. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I, but we'll be scared together." A commotion outside interrupted them. Shouts, the thunder of hooves, the smell of smoke. They rushed out to find the hay barn ablaze, flames already licking at the roof. "Fire! Fire in the hay barn!" The next hour was a desperate battle. Everyone formed bucket brigades, fought to save what they could. Daisy worked despite Luke's protests, knowing every hand was needed. The heat was intense, the smoke choking. She pushed through it, thinking of the horses, the winter feed, the ranch's survival. She was passing buckets when a beam, weakened by fire, cracked overhead. She heard Luke's shout, felt hands shove her aside, and then the world exploded in sparks and pain. When she came to, she was on the ground, Luke's anxious face above her. "The baby," she gasped. "You're all right, both of you." But his face was grim. "The barn's gone, half our winter feed." As if the fire was a signal, more disasters followed. Wells that had been low went dry. Cattle began dying faster. And then came the accusation that would change everything. 3 days after the fire, Sheriff Watson arrived at the ranch. "Need to speak to Miss Sullivan," he said grimly. "What's this about?" Luke demanded. "Man came to my office. Says she stole from him back in Missouri. Says he's her baby's father, and she ran off with money he gave her for personal reasons." Daisy's blood went cold. "That's a lie." "Maybe so, but he's pressing charges. Has papers, witnesses. I need to take you in for questioning." "Like hell you will," Luke snarled. "Luke, no." Daisy put a hand on his arm. "I'll go. I've nothing to hide." But she was lying. As the sheriff led her away, she saw him, Richard Dalton, watching from the porch of the hotel. Only now she knew who he really was. Robert Carlyle, the banker's son, the father of her child. He'd found her at last. At the jail, he was waiting, immaculate despite the dust and heat. "Hello, Margaret," he said smoothly. Or should I say Daisy? Quite the transformation. "What do you want?" "Originally? To ensure you couldn't cause trouble back home. But imagine my surprise finding you here, about to entangle yourself with another prominent family." He smiled coldly. "We can't have that." "I've done nothing wrong, haven't you? A desperate woman, pregnant and alone, happens to find work at a wealthy ranch, happens to seduce the owner's son? Some might call that calculation. Fraud, even. That's not. I have witnesses who'll say you stole money from my father's bank, forged papers to get it, unless—" He let the word hang. "Unless what? You leave tonight, disappear completely, break things off with Morrison, leave the territory entirely." He leaned forward. "Or I'll see you in prison. And what happens to bastard babies when their mothers are in prison? I wonder." The threat hit home. She thought of her child born behind bars, taken away, given to strangers. "You're a monster." "I'm a practical man protecting my family's reputation. You have until dawn to decide." Luke was waiting when the sheriff released her. "What did he say? Who is he?" She couldn't meet his eyes. "It doesn't matter. I need to leave. Luke, tonight." "What? No, whatever he's threatening. Please." She was crying now, hating herself for it. "Just let me go. It's better for everyone." "Better for who? Not for me. Not for us." He grabbed her shoulders. "I love you, Daisy. Whatever this is, we'll face it together. You can't fight this. He has money, connections, lies that sound like truth." She pulled away. "I won't let you destroy your life for me. That's not your choice to make." "Yes, it is." She forced herself to be cruel. Maybe they're right. Maybe I did set out to trap a Morrison brother. Any brother. "You're lying." "Am I? A desperate woman with a baby on the way. Why wouldn't I try to secure my future?" "Because that's not who you are." His voice was fierce. "I know you, Daisy Sullivan. I know your heart." "You know nothing." The words tasted like ashes. "I'm leaving. Luke, don't follow me." She turned and walked away. Each step an agony. Behind her, she heard him calling her name, heard the pain in his voice. But she kept walking. It was the only way to save him from the disaster she'd brought to his door. At the boarding house, Mrs. Fletcher helped her pack without questions, seeing the desperation in her face. As dawn approached, Daisy stood at the edge of town, waiting for the stage that would take her away from everything she'd come to love. She pressed a hand to her belly, feeling the baby move. "It's just us again, little one," she whispered, "but I'll keep you safe. I promise." The stage appeared in a cloud of dust, and she climbed aboard. Not looking back, she couldn't afford to. If she saw Luke one more time, her resolve would crumble. As the town disappeared behind them, she closed her eyes and tried not to think about brown eyes full of love, strong hands gentle with horses and wounded hearts, or the first man who'd ever made her believe she was worth fighting for. She'd saved him by leaving. That had to be enough. It had to be. The stage had barely cleared the town limits when it lurched to a sudden stop. Daisy's heart sank as she heard familiar voices outside. The door yanked open, and Luke stood there, breathing hard. His horse lathered from the chase. "Get out," he said firmly. "Luke, please don't." "I said get out." He reached in and lifted her bodily from the coach, ignoring her protests and the driver's complaints. "Sir, you can continue on. The lady won't be needing your services." "Now see here," the driver began. Luke tossed him a gold piece. "For your trouble, move along." As the stage rumbled away, Daisy found herself standing in the dusty road, furious and heartsick in equal measure. "You had no right." "I have every right. You're carrying my child." "It's not in my heart. It is." He gripped her shoulders. "That man in town, the one who came after you, tell me who he is." "I can't." "Then I'll tell you. His name is Robert Carlyle. He's the son of a Missouri banker, and he's the bastard who abandoned you." Daisy's legs nearly gave out. "How did you—" "I'm not a fool. Daisy, the way you reacted when you saw him, the lies he's spreading, it wasn't hard to piece together." His jaw clenched. "He forced himself on you, didn't he?" "No." The word came out as a whisper. "I told you before. I was willing. I thought we were in love." "And when you told him about the baby, he offered me money to make it go away. When I refused, he had me dismissed from my position, ruined my reputation. I had to leave town." Tears ran down her face. "And now he's here to do it again. He'll destroy you. Luke, your family, the ranch. Let him try." "You don't understand. He has proof that I stole from his father's bank. Forged documents, all lies. The sheriff won't see it that way, not with the witnesses he's bought." She pulled away from him. "Please, Luke, let me go. It's the only way to protect you." "No." The word was granite. "We're going back to town. Right now." "What? Why?" "Because I'm through running from fights, and so are you." He lifted her onto his horse, swinging up behind her. "Hold on." They rode back into Copper Creek just as the town was waking up. But instead of heading to the ranch, Luke directed his horse to the hotel. In the lobby, Robert Carlyle sat taking his breakfast, supremely confident. "Morrison," he said smoothly. "Come to discuss terms?" "In a way." Luke helped Daisy to a chair, then faced Carlyle. "You're going to withdraw your accusations against Miss Sullivan. Then you're going to leave town today." Carlyle laughed. "Am I? And why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone from here to Missouri knows exactly what kind of man you are." Luke's voice was deadly quiet. "A man who seduces innocent women, abandons them with child, then hunts them down to silence them when they try to build new lives. You have no proof of any such. I have her word. That's enough for me. And I have something else." Luke pulled a telegram from his pocket. "Amazing what you can learn when you wire the right people. Seems you're not quite the upstanding citizen you pretend to be. That gambling debt to the Torrance gang? The embezzlement from your father's bank that he covered up to avoid scandal?" Carlyle's face went white. "How dare you?" "I dare because I protect what's mine, and Daisy is mine." Luke leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to the sheriff's office. You're going to withdraw all charges. Say it was a misunderstanding. Then you're getting on the next stage out of town. And if I refuse, then I'll wire every newspaper between here and the Mississippi. I'll make sure the Torrance gang knows exactly where to find you. And I'll personally ensure you never have another peaceful moment in your life." The two men stared at each other. A silent battle of wills. Finally, Carlyle threw down his napkin. "You're making a mistake, Morrison, saddling yourself with another man's leavings." Luke's fist connected with Carlyle's jaw before anyone could react. The banker's son crashed backward, blood streaming from his nose. "That's for her honor," Luke said calmly. "Want to try for yours?" Carlyle struggled to his feet, holding a handkerchief to his nose. "I'll withdraw the charges," he said thickly. "But this isn't over." "Yes, it is." Luke's voice brooked no argument. "If you come near her again, if you so much as whisper her name, I'll kill you. That's not a threat, it's a promise." An hour later, the charges were withdrawn. Carlyle boarded the eastbound stage, nursing his broken nose and broken pride. The town buzzed with gossip, but Luke ignored it all, focused only on Daisy. "You shouldn't have done that," she said as they stood outside the sheriff's office. "The scandal will pass. They always do." He cupped her face gently. "When will you understand? I'd face down 100 scandals for you. Your mother will never forgive this. Then I'll build us a home somewhere else. There's land to the south I've had my eye on. Good water, sheltered valleys. We could start our own place. Luke, be practical. You can't just throw away your inheritance for the woman I love? For our child? Yes, I can." He dropped to one knee right there in the dusty street, in full view of half the town. "Daisy Sullivan, will you marry me? Not someday, not eventually. Now, today." "Luke!" She tried to pull him up, mortified by the public display. "People are staring." "Let them stare. I'm not getting up until you answer." "This is insane. I'm due to give birth any day." "All the more reason to hurry." He pulled a ring from his pocket. Not fancy, just a simple gold band. "I bought this the day after the storm. I've been carrying it ever since, waiting for the right moment. But I'm done waiting. Life's too short and too uncertain. Marry me, Daisy." A crowd had gathered, including Mrs. Fletcher, who called out, "Say yes, child! Don't be a fool!" Even some of the ranch hands were there, grinning and nudging each other. The whole town seemed to hold its breath. Daisy looked down at Luke, this man who'd fought for her, defended her, chosen her above everything else. The practical part of her listed all the reasons to say no. But her heart, that battered organ she'd thought beyond repair, whispered a different answer. "Yes," she said softly, then louder. "Yes, I'll marry you." The cheer that went up surprised them both. As Luke slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, applause broke out. Not from everyone. There were still those who disapproved, who always would. But from enough people to make Daisy realize she'd found something in this harsh land she'd never expected. Acceptance. "The church," Luke said urgently. "Now, before my mother hears and tries to stop us." They nearly made it. Reverend Mills was just beginning the ceremony when the church doors burst open. Mrs. Morrison stood there like an avenging angel, Catherine beside her. "Stop this at once," she commanded. "Mother," Luke said calmly, "you're just in time to witness our wedding. Would you like to sit?" "I'll do no such thing. This is madness. I forbid it." "You can't forbid anything." Henry Morrison's voice came from behind her. He entered the church, looking tired but determined. "The boy's of age. Let him be. Henry, you can't support this insanity." "Can't I?" He moved past his wife to stand beside Luke. "Son, are you certain?" "I've never been more certain of anything." Henry studied Daisy for a long moment. "You'll make him happy." "I'll try my best, sir. That's all anyone can do." He nodded to the Reverend. "Continue. Henry Morrison, if you stand witness to this travesty, you are no husband of mine. Mrs. Morrison's voice shook the rafters. Then I guess I'm no husband of yours. Henry's quiet words fell like stones into water. 27 years. Margaret, I've let you rule with your pride and your prejudices, but not today. Not when my son's happiness is at stake. The silence was deafening. Mrs. Morrison stood frozen, as if unable to comprehend her husband's rebellion. Finally, with a sound like a wounded animal, she fled the church, Catherine trailing behind. Continue, Henry said again, quietly. The ceremony was simple. Witnesses by Mrs. Fletcher, Henry, and a handful of townspeople brave enough to defy convention. When Reverend Mills pronounced them man and wife, Daisy was crying, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. No tears, Luke whispered, kissing her gently. Not on our wedding day. They're happy tears, she assured him, then gasped as a familiar pain rippled through her. Oh, Daisy? Another pain, stronger. I think the baby's coming. The next hours blurred together. Luke carrying her to Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house. The midwife summoned. Luke pacing outside while women's voices murmured within. The pain was terrible, worse than she'd imagined. But she held on to the thought that she wasn't alone, not anymore. It's a girl, the midwife announced at last. Small but healthy. Luke was beside her instantly, staring in wonder at the tiny bundle in her arms. The baby was perfect. A shock of dark hair, rosebud mouth, tiny fingers that gripped his when he offered a finger. She's beautiful, he breathed. What shall we call her? Hope, Daisy said without hesitation, because that's what she represents. Hope Morrison. He tested the name. Our daughter. Luke, she's not. She is. His voice was firm. In every way that matters. She's mine. Ours. As if in agreement. Hope opened her eyes, blue as a desert sky, and looked directly at him. Luke's face transformed with a love so pure it took Daisy's breath away. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For fighting for us, for not giving up, for seeing past everything to what could be. Thank you, he countered, for being brave enough to stay and let yourself be loved. Outside, they could hear the town stirring, news of the birth already spreading. There would be challenges ahead, Mrs. Morrison's fury, the gossip, the struggle to build their own place. But in that moment, with their daughter between them and love binding them together, anything seemed possible. I love you, Mrs. Morrison, Luke said, trying out her new name. And I love you, Mr. Morrison, she replied, meaning it with every fiber of her being. Hope made a small sound. Not quite a cry, more like an announcement of her presence in the world. Her parents laughed, their joy filling the small room and spilling out into the desert beyond, where new beginnings were always possible for those brave enough to chase them. The weeks following Hope's birth brought a fragile peace. Luke had moved Daisy and the baby to a small cabin on the far edge of Morrison land, away from the main house and his mother's poisonous presence. It was modest, but clean, with a view of the mountains that turned purple at sunset. But peace never lasted long in the desert. The news came on a sweltering afternoon when Hope was barely a month old. Daisy was nursing her in the shade of the porch when she saw the rider approaching fast, dust billowing behind him. Her heart sank when she recognized Tom Brennan, the hand Luke had dismissed for harassing her. Well, Brennan said, not bothering to dismount. The happy family. How touching. You're not welcome here, Daisy said, instinctively holding Hope closer. Oh, I think you'll want to hear what I have to say. His smile was ugly. See, I've been talking to a friend of yours, Robert Carlyle. Interesting fellow. Had some real interesting things to say about you. Ice formed in Daisy's stomach. He's gone. He left town. Did he, or did he just move his base of operations? Brennan leaned forward in his saddle. Here's the thing, Mrs. Morrison. Carlyle's willing to pay good money for information about you, about your habits, your routines, when you're alone. Are you threatening me? Threatening? No, ma'am, just sharing information. Like how Carlisle's been buying up water rights all around the territory. Funny thing about drought makes desperate people do desperate things. Sell things they shouldn't. His eyes glittered with malice. Be a shame if the Morrison Ranch suddenly found its wells running dry. Get out, Daisy said, her voice shaking. Get out Before you what? Tell your husband? Go ahead. Tell him Carlisle's still around, still watching. Tell him about the men Carlisle's hired. Men who aren't too particular about what kind of work they do. He turned his horse. You have a real pretty baby there, Mrs. Morrison. Be careful with her. He rode off, leaving Daisy trembling on the porch. Hope fussed, sensing her mother's distress, and Daisy forced herself to calm down. She couldn't panic. She had to think. When Luke came home that evening, she was waiting with Hope asleep in her cradle and a rifle across her lap. What's wrong? He was beside her instantly. She told him everything. Brennan's visit, his threats, the implication that Carlisle was still orchestrating something. Luke's face darkened with each word. I'll find Brennan, he said when she finished. I'll make him tell me where Carlisle is. No. She caught his arm. That's what he wants, you to go charging off, leave us unprotected. We need to be smarter than that. Then what do you suggest? I don't know. She looked at their daughter, so small and vulnerable. Maybe I should take Hope and go. Disappear completely this time. Don't! The word was fierce. Don't even think it. We're not running. Not from him, not from anyone. A sound outside made them both freeze. Luke grabbed his gun, motioning for Daisy to stay back, but when he yanked open the door, it was Henry Morrison standing there, his face grim. Pa, what are you doing here? We need to talk. Henry entered, nodding to Daisy. All of us. He sat heavily, looking older than his years. Your mother's been busy. She's been in contact with Carlisle, feeding him information about the ranch's vulnerabilities. I think she saw it as a way to punish you both, drive you off the land. Her own son? Daisy couldn't hide her shock. Margaret's pride has always been her weakness. She can't bear what she sees as humiliation. Henry rubbed his face. But I don't think she understood what kind of man Carlisle really is. He's not just after revenge on you, Daisy. He's after the whole ranch. He's been buying up water rights, hiring guns, preparing for something. Range war, Luke said grimly. He wants to force us out, take everything. That's my guess, and with the drought worsening, we're vulnerable. Half the hands have already left for better prospects. The ones remaining are loyal, but they're not fighters. What are you saying, Pa? Henry looked at his son, then at Daisy and the baby. I'm saying it's time to make a choice. We can dig in and fight, probably lose everything. Or, he paused. Or we can be smart. That land you've had your eye on to the south, it's still available. Good water rights that Carlisle hasn't touched, far enough away to start fresh. You're saying we should run? Luke's voice was incredulous. I'm saying sometimes the brave choice isn't to fight. It's to protect what matters most. Henry's eyes went to Hope's cradle. I've spent my whole life building that ranch, but I'd trade it all to keep my family safe. What's left of it? Anyway. The cabin fell silent except for Hope's soft breathing. Daisy could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on them. Everything Luke had worked for, his birthright, his legacy, all of it balanced against their safety. It's not running, she said quietly. It's choosing our battles. Carlisle wants to destroy us out of spite. But if we're not here to destroy, if we build something new somewhere else, he wins, Luke said bitterly. No, Henry corrected. He gets land and buildings. We get our lives, our future. That's not losing, son. That's wisdom. Over the next days, they made quiet preparations. Luke rode south to secure the land, using money his father had set aside. They told no one. Moving supplies bit by bit, preparing for a quick departure. But Carlisle struck first. Daisy woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of gunfire. The barn was ablaze, and riders circled in the darkness, whooping and shooting. Luke shoved her and Hope into the root cellar. Stay here, he commanded. No matter what you hear. Luke, no. I'll come back for you. I swear it. He kissed her hard, then was gone. The hours that followed were the longest of Daisy's life. She huddled in the darkness, hope clutched to her chest, listening to the chaos above. Gunfire, shouts, the crash of burning timber, and then, terrifyingly, silence. When the cellar door finally opened, she nearly sobbed with relief to see Luke's face, but he was bloodied, his shirt torn, and his expression was grim. "It's over," he said, helping her up. "But we need to go." Now. The ranch was in ruins. The barn was gone. The house badly damaged. Bodies lay in the yard, some of Carlisle's hired guns, but also good men who'd fought for the Morrison brand. And there, by the corral, a figure that made Daisy's blood run cold. "Is that Carlisle?" Luke confirmed. "He made the mistake of coming himself, wanting to see our destruction firsthand. Brennan shot him in the back. Seems Carlisle didn't pay him what he'd promised." "Where's Brennan now?" "Gone. Lit out as soon as he'd done it. The sheriff's already forming a posse, but he won't get far." Luke looked at the devastation. "Neither will we if we don't move." Henry appeared leading horses, already packed. "South Road's clear. I'll handle things here. Tell them you are pursuing Brennan. By the time they figure otherwise, you'll be across the territory line." "Pa, you can't." "I can and I will." Henry's voice was firm. "This is my mess as much as anyone's. Let me clean it up. You take your family and go build something better." The goodbye was hurried, emotional. Henry kissed Hope's forehead, shook Luke's hand, embraced Daisy with surprising warmth. "Take care of them," he told her. "They're all I have left worth saving." They rode through the night and into the dawn, Hope miraculously sleeping through most of it. When they finally stopped to rest, they were high in the hills, looking back at smoke still rising from what had been their home. "I'm sorry," Daisy said softly. "This is all because of me. If I'd never come, then I'd have lived my whole life under my mother's thumb." Luke interrupted. "Never known real love, real courage, never held our daughter." He pulled her against him. "I'd rather have one day with you than a lifetime without you. But your inheritance, your legacy, you're my legacy. You and Hope. Everything else is just land and cattle." They reached the new property as the sun set on the second day. It was beautiful, a valley green with spring water, mountains providing shelter, good soil waiting to be worked, and best of all, it was theirs, clean and clear. No past haunting it, no bitter memories staining the land. "What do we call it?" Daisy asked as they surveyed their new domain. Luke thought for a moment. "Hope Valley Ranch," he said finally. "Seems fitting." They camped under the stars that night, too exhausted to do more than spread blankets on the ground, but as Daisy lay between her husband and daughter, watching the stars wheel overhead, she felt something she'd thought lost forever. Peace. "Are you happy?" Luke asked quietly. "I'm alive. I'm free. I have you and Hope." She turned to look at him. "Yes, I'm happy. Are you?" "Happier than I've ever been." He was quiet for a moment. "It won't be easy, starting from nothing, building it all up. Nothing worthwhile ever is easy." She thought of all the miles traveled, all the pain endured, all the battles fought just to reach this moment. "But we're together, that's all that matters." Hope stirred between them, making soft baby sounds. Her parents smiled at each other over her head, hands joining in a promise without words. Tomorrow they would begin the hard work of building a life. There would be challenges, setbacks, probably failures along the way, but tonight, under the vast desert sky, they were just a family beginning their story. The past was ashes and smoke behind them. Ahead lay only possibility. "I love you, Daisy Morrison," Luke whispered. "And I love you," she whispered back. Hope sighed contentedly, as if agreeing with her parents' sentiment. And in the distance, a coyote called to its mate, the sound no longer threatening but simply part of the wild, beautiful world they would make their own. The stars continued their eternal dance, and the little family slept, safe at last in the valley that bore their daughter's name and their hope for the future. 5 years had passed since they'd claimed the valley as their own. The small camp had grown into a proper homestead, a sturdy cabin with real glass windows, a barn that could withstand desert storms, corrals filled with healthy horses, and gardens that bloomed despite the harsh climate. Hope had grown into a spirited child with her mother's determination and her father's quiet strength. She ran barefoot through the valley, brown as a berry from the sun, chattering to the horses in a mix of English and Spanish learned from their hired hands. Spring had come early that year, painting the desert with unexpected color. Daisy stood in her teaching room, an addition Luke had built after she'd started teaching letters to local children, watching her pupils copy their lessons. Word had spread that the Morrison woman could read and write and was willing to teach. And now families traveled miles to bring their children to her. Mrs. Morrison. Look. Young Samuel Fletcher held up his slate proudly. I wrote my whole name. Excellent work, Samuel. She moved between the desks, offering encouragement and gentle corrections. Through the window, she could see Luke working with a new colt, patient as always. Hope sat on the fence, calling out suggestions that made her father laugh. The sound of approaching horses drew her attention. 2 riders were coming down the valley trail, and her hand instinctively moved to the rifle she kept mounted by the door. Old habits died hard, but as they drew closer, she recognized them. Though it had been years, Henry Morrison looked grayer, more stooped, but his eyes were warm as they met hers. Beside him rode a young man she almost didn't recognize. James Morrison. No longer the absent brother who'd placed that fateful advertisement, but someone marked by years and experience. Class dismissed early today, Daisy announced, ignoring the children's protests. Once they'd scattered, she stepped onto the porch, unsure of the reception she'd give or receive. Luke had seen them too, leaving the colt to stride across the yard. Pa, he said carefully. James? Son, Henry dismounted stiffly. Mrs. Morrison. He tipped his hat to Daisy with genuine respect. I hope we're not unwelcome. That depends, Luke said evenly. On why you're here. Ma's dead, James said bluntly. Stroke. 3 months ago. Went quick. Daisy felt no satisfaction at the news, only a distant sadness for a life consumed by pride and bitterness. I'm sorry for your loss. Henry studied her face. I believe you mean that. Margaret never could understand you. But I think I'm beginning to... He looked around the thriving homestead. You've done well here. We've worked for it, Luke said, still wary. I can see that. Henry's gaze found Hope, who had approached shyly. And this must be... Hope, Daisy said, placing a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. Hope, these are your grandfather and uncle. Hope looked up at her mother, then at the strangers. The ones who were mean to you. Heat flooded Daisy's face. Hope, but Henry laughed, a rusty sound. Out of the mouths of babes. Yes, child. We were mean. We were wrong. He knelt stiffly to Hope's level. Could you forgive a foolish old man? Hope considered this seriously. Mama says everyone deserves a second chance, but only if they really mean it. Your mama is a wise woman. Henry reached into his pocket. I brought something. It was your grandmother's, and her mother's before that. He pulled out a small golden locket. I'd like you to have it, if your parents allow. Hope looked at her parents. Luke nodded slowly, and she accepted the gift with careful hands. Why are you really here? Luke asked as Hope ran to show her treasure to the horses. James spoke up. The ranch is failing. The drought, bad investments, most of the good hands gone. We need help. And you thought of us? Daisy couldn't hide her incredulity. I thought of family, Henry corrected. What's left of it? Catherine married and moved to San Francisco. There's just James and me now, and neither of us has Luke's gift with the land. You want us to come back, Luke said flatly. I want to make a proposal. Henry straightened. Merge our holdings. Your water rights here could save the home ranch. In exchange, full partnership. Equal shares for you and James. The Morrison legacy continues, but on your terms. After everything that happened, Because of everything that happened. James interrupted. Luke, I owe you both an apology. I was a coward, staying away, letting Mother poison everything with her pride. When I placed that advertisement, I wanted a wife, yes, but I never wanted someone to get hurt. Pretty words, Daisy said coolly. Where were you when I needed them? Hiding, James admitted. Running from responsibility, from family, from everything. But I'm here now, asking for a chance to make things right. Luke looked at Daisy. A whole conversation passed between them in that glance. Years of shared struggle, shared triumph, shared love. We need to talk, Luke said finally. Alone. There's lodging in town. We'll send word tomorrow. After they left, Luke and Daisy sat on their porch, watching hope play in the fading light. The valley spread before them, golden in the sunset. Everything they'd built through sweat and determination. What do you think? Luke asked. I think people can change, Daisy said slowly. Your father defended us in the church. That took courage. And James is harder to read, but he came here, faced us. That's something. We don't need them, Luke pointed out. We're doing fine on our own. Are we? Daisy turned to him. The school is growing, but I need supplies, books. The ranch is profitable, but barely. And Hope, she has family she's never known, cousins in San Francisco, a grandfather who seems genuinely repentant. You're saying we should consider it? I'm saying we should think about what's best for our daughter. Pride kept your mother bitter and alone. I won't let it do the same to us. That night, they lay in bed discussing possibilities. By morning, they'd reached a decision. The negotiation took place in Daisy's schoolroom. Symbolic ground. Terms were set. Equal partnership. Shared decisions. Respect for boundaries. But more than business was settled that day. I remember your first letter, James said to Daisy as they signed papers. You wrote about wanting a place to belong, a family to call your own. I failed you then. I'd like to try again, if you'll let me. As a brother. Brothers protect their sisters, Daisy said carefully. They don't abandon them to wolves. Then I have much to prove. He offered his hand. Let me start now. The merger of the ranches created one of the largest operations in the territory. More importantly, it began to heal old wounds. Henry proved a doting grandfather, teaching Hope to ride and telling her stories of the land. James, true to his word, became the brother Daisy had never had, fierce in his protection of her reputation and interests. The community that had once whispered about the mail-order bride now spoke with respect of Mrs. Morrison, teacher and rancher's wife. Her school grew, bringing education to children who would have had none. Some were white, some Mexican, some Indian. Daisy turned none away, remembering her own struggles with letters and numbers. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Luke surprised her with a trip to the coast. They stood on cliffs overlooking the Pacific, hope between them, a family, complete and whole. Do you ever regret it? Luke asked. The life you might have had if you'd never answered that advertisement? What life? Daisy laughed. Scrubbing floors in Missouri, hiding my shame? She looked at her daughter, bright and bold and unafraid. Every hard step led me here, led me to you. How could I regret that? That evening, they attended the theater in San Francisco. Daisy in a gown finer than anything she'd dreamed of owning, but when a society matron sniffed about that unfortunate mail-order bride situation, Daisy held her head high. Yes, she said clearly. I was a mail-order bride. I answered an advertisement and traveled west with nothing but hope. And look what grew from that hope. She gestured to Luke, to Hope, to the life they'd built. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. The woman retreated, flustered. Luke grinned. That's my Daisy, still fighting battles with truth instead of fists. Some battles are worth fighting, she said, and some are won simply by living well. Years later, when Hope was grown and running her own school, when the ranch had prospered beyond their dreams, when grandchildren played in the same valley that had sheltered their beginning, Daisy would look back on that scared girl stepping off the train in Copper Creek and marvel at the journey. She'd been called a joke, scorned and humiliated, driven into the desert with nothing but the child in her womb and the strength in her spine. But she'd returned carrying joy and love, building a life that proved the best revenge against cruelty was happiness itself. The mail-order bride had become a matriarch, a teacher, a voice for those who had none. But most importantly, she'd become herself, not despite the struggles, but because of them. Each scar had made her stronger. Each challenge had revealed her character. Each act of love had multiplied until it filled a valley, a family, a legacy. And in the end, that was no joke at all. It was a triumph. In the golden light of a desert evening, as she sat surrounded by family on the porch of the home she'd helped build, Daisy Morrison smiled. She'd traveled so far from that train platform, that first glimpse of unforgiving land, but every mile had been worth it. She was home. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the American frontier. I hope Daisy and Luke's story touched your heart as much as it touched mine in the telling. Where are you listening to this tale tonight? Are you by a cozy fireplace, driving through the countryside, or perhaps settling in for the evening? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of love, courage, and redemption in the Old West, please consider subscribing to Wild West Campfire for more tales of frontier romance and adventure. Share your thoughts about Daisy's journey. Did you see yourself in her struggles? What part of her story resonated with you most? Until we meet again around the campfire, keep the spirit of the frontier alive in your hearts. Happy trails, partners.